And so I remember when Trip, that African-American guy, the one that I said was, he was in the National Guards at the time. Yeah, I remember when Trip showed up, he brought something new to us, which is, let's compete. Let's formalize this. You guys are pretty good at what you do. Let's take the stuff on the road. And so he's the first one who said, we need a name of our group. And it was him, another friend of mine, Tito, and I. We were sort of the three oldest, and we would sit there and try to argue and figure out what to name the group. And in the end, our first name was the Battlezone Breakers, and I think Trip is the one who came up with that name. And it was looking back, that was a really damn cool name, the Battlezone Breakers. And so we actually, with the Battlezone Breakers, I remember us, we entered a few competitions, but the one that I remember the most was, by the way, backing up a little bit, Trip had this, so we practiced our moves the entire summer long, and, Trip was practicing doing the windmill, and I was trying to practice to get it. I could do the windmill, but I was not as good at it as others were, but I got pretty good at breakdancing. But the thing about breakdancing is that each person sort of had a specialty, that one person could pop real well, and by then we sort of faded away from Agato and Keith and because they were not competing in breakdancing, and I started hanging out with these some of my other friends who were actually into breakdancing. I still see Agato and some of my other friends, at different points, but as far as breakdancing were concerned, that's what, it was, Trip and Tito and some of the other guys. And I remember this one little kid, and he was 9 years old. His name was Eloy. And Eloy was this cute little kid, and Trip saw one of these guys. I guess he must have saw this move somewhere where you put one guy on the neck and the other one on the front, and basically he's spinning them in circle, and it is like one guy is hanging out in the front, his legs are all the way out, and Eloy's in the back, and he put Eloy on his head, and he's spinning Eloy on his head while I think it was crazy. It was just because Trip was in very good shape, and so he had like 2 people or 3 people. One guy I think is hooked around his waist, and he's spinning Eloy on his head, and and it was just the coolest move. And then he had this other move that he called the frog, and Trip would just stay there and just go on the stage. And it was this cool move. And so, I was good at the crab, on your hand, anything hand related, hand spins, crabs, not that kind of crabs. Not good at that crabs. Okay, I'm talking about the dance move crab. Okay, and so I was really good at that. And so in several other things, and I was good at planning and organizing and strategizing and stuff like that. And so I remember our first competition where we went down to Lowell, Massachusetts to compete at the stadium. And when we got there, the stadium, it wasn't the capacity, but it was probably about maybe a third capacity. So I'd say there's, maybe 1,000 people, or maybe it might have been a couple thousand people there. But that's the biggest crowd that I've ever seen that came out, because it was everyone from that community. So I think it was possibly half packed, that stadium at the time. And I remember all these groups from all over the place showed up to compete, and they were on stage and before the competition started, and they were showing off all their moves. And we're telling each other, we're like, don't do anything, don't show anything, don't let them see what you can do. Let's just hang back. And all of them are on there, and they're showing off before the competition, showing all their moves. And we just sat there, didn't say anything. We're just quiet, we're polite. And then the competition started. And everybody was, each group went up, they were doing their thing, but it was more of the same because they had pretty much showed most of their moves, and the crowd had gotten there early. So by the time, my group, the Battlezone Breakers, went on stage, and we started to dance. These kids had never seen the moves that we were doing before, and not with the level of proficiency. This one guy, Amir, was doing a windmill, and he was just the crown of his head was the only thing touching the floor, and he was just whipping it so fast. And the thing that you need to understand about breakdancing, it's one of the only kind of activity that I remember that you can give it, you know, when you're doing a windmill and you're going so fast that it's like you can feel the amount of energy as you're just or you're doing a crab and you're just spinning. It's a blur down there and you're just going. I mean, there's something just very powerful about it. And that's one of the reasons I always thought, why isn't this in the Olympics? Because I would look at gymnasts and I'd go, we do flips. You know, some of the guys are doing flares. Some of the guys are doing flips. So, you know, I'm like, some of the moves that these guys are doing, you know, I've seen lots of kids doing that. So later, 20-something years later, now breakdancing is actually in the Olympics. Not as part of it, but the actual breakdance portion of it. And I can see why, because it was very physical, very technical moves that were being done. And so we started to breakdance, and those kids, the people in the crowd, had never seen anything quite like that. You know, Tripp was on there and he was doing the frog all over the place, and I was doing the crab, and Amir's doing the windmill, and, you know, and Tripp got Eloy and he spinned him on his head, and it was all of us are out there. We're all doing something different. So we made sure that we're less orchestrated, like we're doing more synchronized and less synchronized, but more just different, just a smorgasbord of different kind of moves going at the same time that people couldn't figure out who to put their eyes on. And after a while, I looked out for a second because I was just in a zone, and our competition was cheering for us. All the kids that were competing against us started cheering for us because they were so impressed by it. It was one of the coolest moments. I mean, when have you ever been to a competition that your competitors are cheering for you because you're so damn good at what you did? And we won, obviously, and they were happy for us and they were impressed. And we got this cassette radio, and it was, at the time, boom boxes were in. And there were these normal boom boxes that would have one cassette tape in there. For you young people, a cassette tape is where the music is on there. It's on this little reel, and you put it in this thing, and it spins on this thing. You got to go to the museum and check it out. It makes noise. It's not like a CD or a DVD or even vinyl. But talk to your parents. So but this particular one, it didn't have one or two cassette players. It had 3 cassette players, and we had never seen anything like that before. We heard about it, but it was the first time that we all, and there was just one cassette boombox that we had, and Larry was there too. Larry was there, and Larry was from New York, and he could pop really good, and Larry was just a very cool guy. And so we had it was just so many good things going on there at that time. And so we won the boom box, and then what we did is we would share it among each of the people of our team members. So you'd have it for a couple of weeks, you'd have it for a couple of weeks, you'd have it for a couple of weeks, and that's kind of how we did it.